Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome to a new episode. Wow, it's been a while since I've said this. To Unscrambled Faith, new episode of Unscrambled Faith. I am your host, Megan Hammonds. And if you have been around for a little bit, thank you for hanging out and hanging around, I should say, more importantly, because it's been a while. But I will say first and foremost, right out the gate, that I couldn't be more excited to be able to introduce myself now with my maiden name. And I'm currently, as Kirby's behind me, I'm currently in my office. And you know what's interesting is that, to catch everyone up, in case you haven't been listening, or if you're, maybe, I don't know, maybe you're listening to this for the very first time, that's okay, welcome. But, the other day, I went back and I listened to the last episode that I recorded. Period. Like the most recent episode. And to catch you up a little bit in case you haven't been around for a little while. Maybe this again is your first episode listening in. Long story short, short story long. I spent the better half of the last end of the year. So maybe like November. I say better half, really. It was honestly like November, December, breaking down and sharing a lot of intimate details because I was filing for divorce. And not only that, but I wanted to bring anybody who was open to listening. More importantly, I learned honestly in the long run that it was more healing for myself, but I brought everyone into my space as far as what was going on with me mentally, what was next, maybe things that I had been through. Hi Kirby. Kirby is now officially going to be a part of the podcast because she is more than welcomed in my office. So this is going to be a new experience. So everybody welcome Kirby. But I'm excited. I listened to the last episode that I recorded. Hi baby. I listened to the last episode that I recorded. Are you telling everyone hi? And I didn't want to listen to the entire episode. The reason being is that was a completely different version of myself, different chapter, and I just didn't really need to. But be careful. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to listen to it. Kirby's reminding me a lot of my cat that I used to have before she passed away a couple of years ago, probably longer than that, honestly. But Bella, she's reminding me a lot of Bella. Are you gonna be a camera ham? But circling back, sorry. So I listened to the last 15-20 minutes of the most recent episode that I recorded, and the reason why I wanted to do that was because I really wanted to get in the headspace of where I was at that point. What I was thinking about, what was going on with me mentally, what were my plans, what did I discuss, etc. And you know what? I'm pretty damn proud of myself because it has been, I think, at least a solid 2 months, at least, since I last recorded. And when I did record, for the minimal time that I did listen to the recording, I heard everything that I did listen to, and what I heard was exactly what I needed to hear. No more, no less. And when I tell you, backtracking to the last time I recorded, which was a little over 2 months ago, that version of myself didn't know what was next for myself. I didn't know what was next. I knew that I had already filed for divorce. I knew that it was going to be at least a solid 2 months, maybe longer, before it was finalized. I knew that I needed to find a place to stay. And more importantly, because I was working from home, I knew that I absolutely, without a doubt, had to find at least a full-time job, if not possibly 2 part-time jobs. Everything was in the air. And that's when I knew, when I listened to the first 20 minutes or so of the last podcast that I recorded, that was I knew that was all that I needed to hear, because I blew my mind. So to catch y'all up to where I'm at now, because let's be honest, it's been a while. But you know what? I also am proud that I took the last 2 months out to not only continue healing, but to figure out my own space. And I'm not gonna lie, I've been busy. I've been busy, and not necessarily by choice, because I knew that whenever let's see, so let's reflect back on the last 2 months. So I went house hunting with one of my good friends who is also my realtor. I ended up circling back to the first house, which is where I'm at now, that I ended up moving into. So thanks be to God for sure on that one. That was a blessing in disguise. During the last podcast I recorded, as I mentioned earlier, I was looking for 2 jobs. I ended up, through a family, ended up finding like one job that I still have now, which is incredible. More or less kind of part-time, full-time if I wanted, but part-time right now. And then the other one was seasonal. And again, it was a blessing in disguise, because when I say that I was exhaustingly like applying to places to no end, also I find it that it was rather difficult to figure out what I could possibly take from working from home for like the last 4 or 5 years, and attribute that in a way of figuring out how can I reword it, how can I apply this to any kind of job that I'm applying for outside of the home. So that was rather difficult in itself, but I ended up getting it done. I was proud of myself for creating the resume, applied to places to no end, and like I said earlier, I mean, thanks be to God, because I owe it all to God for sure, 100%, that I was able to land 2 jobs right before I ended up moving out of my ex-husband's house. And not only that, but then finding the place that I can move into. And when I say, it was like bam, 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 like one thing after another. But you know what? Through it all, especially in the very beginning, 2 months back, I constantly had to remind myself that what we already know, we hear all the time, is that God doesn't hand us anything that He knows that we can't handle, big or small. And when I tell y'all that I knew that at some point I was going to have to slow down, be present. However, during the time that my divorce was finalized, which was like, I think mid-January, up until like moving out, finding a new place, getting the jobs, I had limited time to myself. My energy was minimal. And I knew that I not only had to protect my peace in a way, or not really protect my peace, but just be more cautious of like the time, and know that any downtime that I had here in my new house, I had to make it count. And that was an adjustment itself. Coming from somebody who worked from home, working from home, you have to have like structure, and it sometimes can be difficult. But then I remember in the last like year or two, it was a lot nicer, because I was set up in a way financially when I was married that if I wanted to work that day, I could work, or I could maybe have like a lighter workload, quote unquote. And I was working my 2 businesses this past year in a way that I didn't really have to exhaust myself to build success, and it was working for me. However, again, whenever you're facing the reality that I'm going to have to, get a new place, I'm going to have more bills, my own bills. And it's funny, because in the last couple of years, I promised myself up and down, I was like, I'll never go to a 9 to 5. I'll never work outside the home. Working from home at that point, I got so comfortable with. It was my jam. I loved it. I even said, when I had heard a couple of my own friends that work from home, what they were saying, and it was just that I'm unhireable. I'm unhireable. And the irony is that when you find yourself in a position when I was just trying to keep my head above water, keep positive, focus on the small things. I even talked about this, I think, in maybe one of the previous episodes, where I shared that one of the biggest things for me, one of my takeaways going through my divorce before it finalized, was focusing on the bigger goals. So bigger goals being that kind of allowing my brain to dream, like daydream. What is my new place going to look like? what are the things that what kind of space do I want to create in each room? You know, the mood, the theme. I remember there were a couple of things, specifically like in the last month before I officially moved out, that I purchased. Not big things, like small things, like we're talking like, you know, little painted Canva print, or if someone gifted me, like I had a good friend of mine who just so happened, not knowing that I was going to be moving out soon, just so happened to gift me, it was like a little kitchen set where it was like a, you know, like a hand towel, what else, like the little oven mitt, things like that. It was like a little matching set. And yeah, I could have like immediately used it right then and there, but I was like, you know what, I want to save this for my new place. So that's where I'm at now. My second seasonal job just officially ended. I worked for a tax office, so thank goodness tax season is over with, at least for myself. I will say though that I surprised myself in a lot of ways, specifically with that job, because I struggle a lot with staying on task. Full transparency. I don't know if you can relate to that or not, but I struggle with staying on task. And a lot of times I'll have like little things here and there. Like today, for example, I have to, when I'm cleaning around the house, organizing around my house, I have to, like a little butterfly, I flutter from like one thing to another, and I don't necessarily want to focus on just one thing the whole day. I'll break it up into like little increments. And so like, for example, I did the dishes, and then I was like, okay, I do need to like hand wash these dishes as well, but I don't want to segue right into that because it's going to mentally burn me out. So then what did I do? I like popped over into my bedroom. I had a bunch of jewelry because y'all, I'll tell y'all, I'm kind of playing catch up around my house because, you know, like I said, I moved into my new place mid-January. Yeah, mid-January. And during the midst of that, when I tell you, I think like every other day I was unloading at least 2 boxes at a time. And it was funny because my coworkers at my seasonal job, I know jokingly, but giving me a hard time because they're like, "You're still unpacking?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm still unpacking because a lot of days I'm working 2 jobs back to back." And if that's the case, I'm gone from like pretty much like sun up to almost sundown, and I maybe get an hour or 2 if I'm lucky in between. And some of those days, that's what it looked like. That was the reality. And otherwise, I also was not used to working 2 jobs outside the home, so moving in itself was mentally and physically exhausting. And I knew that the beauty of it was that I wasn't in any rush. I think that was the most important part for me to remember, is that I wasn't in any rush. And the movers were so great in a way of like being able to, I told them like, okay, these boxes are going to go like in this room. And I labeled almost all my boxes of where everything was going to go. And so that made it a lot more seamless, a lot more organized. And I just worked a little bit at a time. And I'm really proud of myself because in past years when I've moved, there have been times when I've had endless amount of boxes and then I've just kept going and going and going and not really focuses on much with the fact that like I was getting burned out and exhausted. And I'm glad that I slowed down and like took the time that I did, because then I was really able to appreciate and feel proud of myself, honestly, for getting these accomplishments done along the way. And I'm excited because in this last week, I spent more time putting up some of the decor in some of the rooms. And so that's been really nice, especially because being that I have been in my new place for a little over 2 months now, I've had plenty of time to think about where am I putting everything. I haven't really bought necessarily anything like decor wise that I can think of just yet that's like brand new. A lot of the things that came with me were things that I had from my old house, things that were personally mine. And you know what? A lot of times what I like is being able to take things that we already own that maybe come from like a different space in the house, and then repurpose it and bring it into like another room. And it just, honestly, visually to me, it just looks brand new. I was very fortunate and blessed. My mom's very much like myself, where there are times where we have moments where we just want to declutter and sell or donate, get rid of things, and it's just kind of like a mini purge. And so I wasn't hating it because there was a couple of things that she was getting rid of, decoration wise, decor wise. And I told her that I would go ahead and take them off of her hands, because I was like, worst case scenario, best case scenario, I'll find somebody else or I can donate them, either way. But that was really satisfying, because even though those pieces were not new to her, they were new to me because I didn't have them in my previous house. But yeah, and I will say too that I'm really proud of myself for jumping on and recording this podcast at this point. I also am proud of myself for not mentally getting down on myself. I will say that I almost felt like there was kind of like this mental ticking timer that I have mentioned to like my therapist or a couple of friends here and there over the last couple weeks, kind of plugging in their ear like, I'm recording a new podcast, I'm getting back out there, I can't wait to start recording again, etc. And also I knew that even though as soon as I moved into my new place, I will say that I wanted to like right out the gate like start recording again, but I'm glad I didn't. I'm not gonna lie, I'm glad I didn't, because I felt like that if I did, I would have held myself to like a stricter schedule. I think it would have felt a little bit more like a chore, and I necessarily like that wasn't the vibe for me. And I knew that when the time was right, it was going to come for me to record, and here we are. The funny thing is that, as I mentioned earlier, we are currently in the room that is going to otherwise be my office. This is the absolute last room in my house that I have left to unpack. And I did that on purpose, again, because when I moved into my new place, I knew that I wasn't going to, I had the switch flipped, because I knew that I wasn't going to necessarily be able to focus on my two personal businesses. That became more of like a social thing, so I knew that it was going to be like a lot of following up with my customers and my clients from both jobs one-on-one. A lot of emails were going to take place, and also I knew that at one time, slowly but surely or another, a lot of them, not the majority of them, but most of them would figure out in one way or another what was going on in my life. And thankfully they all are very understanding. And so now I'm happy, because now that I have wrapped up my seasonal job that I had, I decided that I was going to give myself a couple weeks of a mental break. I'm still working my other job, and I was like, you know what? Now is the time for me to slow down a little bit, but I'm excited to now unpack the rest of these boxes that are in this office. Fortunately, that's what closed doors are for. Right? Being able to close the door and kind of ignore that it's been there. But let's be honest, like, even though I did close the door off and on throughout, the weeks in the last few months, I still knew that it was here. But I feel good about being able to get back into the space. What else has been going on with me? So, a couple of things that I'll probably break down and talk a little bit more about, in the weeks to come, is that changes that have been taken place in my life, without going down too much of a rabbit hole, and too much of my soapbox. But, one thing, reflecting back on towards the end, before I moved out, some changes that have taken place is, first and foremost, friends. I have found out who my true friends are. And not only that, but, I not only outgrew my marriage, but I did find that I outgrew some of my friendships. And it wasn't anything, I guess it was different. Again, I think I might spend another podcast episode just kind of breaking that down a little bit more, because I feel like I owe that conversation a little bit more than just a couple of minutes of my time. And I think that that's honestly like an episode in itself. But I'll just say, I guess really just that, is that it's true what I've heard, what people told me along the way, is that this is a just different chapter of my life. This is a decision that I made for myself. Honestly, it's the best decision I could have made for myself. However, what came along with that is that not everybody's going to agree with that. And just like, I firmly believe, and I've said this so many times before in the past, that we outgrow friendships. People come into our lives for a reason and a season. And I think that, I know that there were people towards the end before my divorce finalized, before I even moved out, that I just, some of them, it wasn't anything necessarily specifically that they did. It was just that we just didn't have that much in common anymore. And I'm in a new space and a new mindset. Now, I will say one of the more or less like intimidating, scarier things was that when I knew that I was moving out, getting my own place, starting this next chapter of my life, that it was scary thinking that I wasn't going to have any close friends other than my one best friend, my soul sister. That would be my ride or die. But other than that, I was like, I don't think I'm going to have anybody else. No one else to talk to, no one else to lean on. I mean, I know God. I know God first and foremost. But in a physical sense, my best friends were kind of like no more. My good friends were no more. And I was actively choosing to not bring them into this new chapter of my life. However, that also meant that this chapter, I would say the last 2 months, well, no, I take it back. The first month that I moved into my house, it was rather lonely. Lonely, not in the house per se, but it was lonely with not having like friendship, with not having anybody that I could really like lean on and confide in. But you know what? But God. Because the seasonal job that I had, there were a couple friends, a couple coworkers of mine that I really became really close with. And it was incredible because getting to know them on a more personal level outside of, just working with them, I knew that God was aligning all of us to work there, all of us, for myself even, to be there for a specific reason. And it was uplifting, and honestly, I hope that we get to hang out even now, like after my seasonal job, after the second job's over with and done. However, if we don't, I'm not going to have hard feelings, because that was it was just perfect timing. Perfect timing. That's all I can say about that, is that the job was challenging, yes, but it forced me to stretch in a way of getting out of my comfort zone, getting out of my headspace, taking on and doing something that I didn't ever see myself doing, which was great. But then just the people that I met along the way and the people that I worked with, it was just perfect timing. It was in God's timing for sure. Because not only was I able to show up for them, but then they were able to show up for me. We were able to connect on a personal level, share stories with one another. They could relate. I became closer to one in a way that she could relate to me, as far as, going through a divorce, moving to a new place, a new space. And that just felt really encouraging to know that I was in the company of somebody that had already been there, done that. But then also there were like little seeds planted along the way also over the last 2 months or so. Can I mention the fact that I joined Hotworks, and I knew that at some point or another, because I had been through my therapy journey, almost 5 years now, I want to say, which is awesome. But I knew that I wanted to work on myself mentally before I got to the physical part. And I knew that once I came out on the other side of things, and it was like, okay, there's really no excuse anymore at this point. And what's interesting is that whenever I moved and got out of that space, I just didn't realize how exhausting and how much energy was being drained until I got into my new house. And not only that, but then how easy it was for me to, I think, what was it, like a month ago that I joined Hotworks? It was almost like a no-brainer for me. I remember it was about 2 years ago, I want to say, or so, when I started following this specific location and their Instagram account. And I knew that once I got into my new house, in my new space, I knew that I didn't know how I was going to be moving my body, but I knew that I wanted to get out and start working out again. I just didn't know what that was going to look like. I knew that I'm not a big fan of the gym. Don't come for me. If you like the gym, you like the gym. But I'm not a fan of the gym. I like structure. I don't like a lot of variety. In fact, there's a lot of things in life. Like, when they say variety is the spice of life, not for me. Because a lot of times I don't I don't want a lot of choices because then it's hard for me to decide. So when I think it was maybe a video or something I'd come across with HotWorks, I was like, oh, I forgot, because and now where I live, it's right down the way from me. And so whenever I had my my second job, it was a no-brainer because I passed by the location on the way home. And so it just made it so much more easier for me to go by there and show up and do the workouts because it was just on the way. But I'm absolutely loving it. I try to get in at least 3 classes a week. And like I said, I'm really proud of myself too. I know I just keep saying that, but I'm proud of myself for moving my body. And I physically feel better. But yeah, it was a big adjustment when I first moved in 2 months back. But now I'm in my element. I'm loving it. I love the fact that, I'm coming home to a place that not only is pretty much all mine, but that I don't have to, like, I know what to expect. I'm not tiptoeing around. I'm not having to, what do I want to say? I'm not having to, mask anymore. I'm not having to adjust. Like, it's really hard when you're not, for one, if you don't feel safe around somebody, but not only that, but when someone's behavior is unpredictable and you don't know what kind of day you're going to have, because depending on what kind of day that person is having is going to take effect on how your day goes. That's exhausting. And I just love the fact that in my own home, I'm showing up for myself. I'm trying new things. And yeah. And that life is good. Life is good. But I'm excited. Who's to say what's going to happen over these next couple weeks? But back at it. I'm recording again weekly for sure. So make sure to stay tuned if you haven't already subscribed where you're listening or viewing at. Make sure to do so you're not going to miss out on all the good stuff. But if you have been around for a while, excuse me, I need to take a sip of my water. If you've been around for a little while, thank you all for hanging out with me. Thank you for being patient with me. I'm excited. I'm excited for whatever's to come. I don't really have anything planned per se. I know these last couple months when I did record at the end of this last year, it more or less was planned out. But we'll see. I'm excited what God has in store for me over these next couple weeks, over this next part of the podcast. Oh, and if you haven't noticed already, the branding is different for the podcast. I decided to keep the name. I know at the end of last year I was debating on whether or not I was going to keep Unscrambled Faith. I decided to keep the name. I like it. It's not going anywhere. However, I am loving the new brand, the new look, the color. It's clean. It feels right. It was inspiring, and it just feels like it's more me now. But stay tuned. I can't, like I said, I can't wait to record more for what's to come. I also will say too that there's been a lot of things in the last couple weeks, more or less, that I've been getting out of my comfort zone and trying out and having a good time with. Like, for example, there was a girl that I met recently at a vendor event, and I've been doing a lot more, starting to do a lot more crafting activities with her. She does them mostly on the weekends. And so this last weekend, I created a prayer journal. So that was a lot of fun. That was really cool being able to put that together, because I've seen them before. It was very intimidating, but I was proud of myself for getting out of my comfort zone and doing something new. I think Kirby's telling me it's time to wrap it up. And then I think in 2 weeks from now, or so, we're doing homemade cards, for Mother's Day. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And, speaking of mothers, so my mom and I are hanging out tonight. We're going to go to the movies. We're going to go see the new Michael Jackson movie. And to know me, Kirby, to know me is to know I love a good theme. So my mom and I are going to get dressed up for the movie. Kirby, you're telling me to wrap it up? Oh my gosh, this is going to be interesting. Keeping her, she's definitely going to keep me on my toes, being in my office and on the podcast, because I haven't done that she was not. I didn't actually. I had a dog and 3 cats, if y'all didn't know, at the old house. And I never allowed the cats in my office area because it was just too crazy with 3 cats. But with this one, I don't know. This is more. I think this has actually been maybe more or less like her room over the last 2 months. So, I can't kick her out. I think she's trying to honestly kick me out. But I hope y'all have an incredible week. Stay blessed. Until next time, again, thanks for hanging out. Stay tuned. I cannot wait to start recording more. But in the meantime, don't forget to unscramble your faith and find clarity in the chaos. Bye, guys.